The Prime Minister has arrived in Vietnam, where he'll be meeting with leaders in efforts to boost diplomatic relations. Mr Albanese kick-started his trip this afternoon by enjoying local fare at a busy Vietnamese restaurant. Our chief news anchor, Kieran Gilbert, is in Hanoi and joins us live now. Kieran, great to see you again. Tell us more about the Prime Minister's plans.
Yes, so the Prime Minister's now in Hanoi, as you mentioned, Gab, and it was, first of all, to RMIT. The Melbourne University's been in Vietnam for more than 20 years. There's about 7,000 Vietnamese students here and in Melbourne. So it's a big part of our export market for higher education, and they've just expanded here in Hanoi. So the Prime Minister went there first up, and then to a local restaurant where they sell banh mi, the pork rolls and beer. He was there not only to enjoy the local produce and enjoy some lunch with locals, but also to highlight the fact that the wheat was from Australia, and the barley in the beers, 99% of barley in Vietnamese beer comes from Australia. So it was another export story, and the Prime Minister was keen to talk it up. Have a look.
Barley exports grew to Vietnam by some 75% since 2020. And Vietnam is one of the top 10 consumers of beer in the world. A little fun fact for Kieran Gilbert there.
Hopefully you've been able to enjoy the local produce as well, Kieran. But talk to us about the issues that are going to dominate talks with Vietnamese leaders.
Yeah, so a bit of a sort of light-hearted start to it. It gets serious day two, Gab, when the Prime Minister meets with the Vietnamese leadership. Just to the north of Vietnam, their neighbour is the huge giant of the region, China. There are disputed claims in the South China Sea between Vietnam and China, so they know the Chinese rising power and assertiveness and aggression better than anyone. So I asked the PM whether or not there are lessons that Australia can learn in how Vietnam manages the complexity of a neighbour, a rising, more assertive and more aggressive neighbour.
And Vietnam, of course, shares a border with China to its north. We will have discussions, no doubt. We'll touch on that relationship. We'll touch as well on we and Vietnam share a view on the South China Sea, and that the Convention on Law of the Sea needs to be upheld and maintained, that we need to respect nations' sovereignty in the region and indeed throughout the world. And we share that view.
So the PM here for those talks, he's going to be meeting with the leadership. There are 4 senior members of the Communist Party that he'll be meeting. Basically, it's a shared leadership in Vietnam, not one ruler as such. It's 4 members of the Vietnamese Communist Party and the leadership that the Prime Minister meets tomorrow, all with relatively equal status. So that's a big day of those talks about the region, about economic cooperation. And the reason he's here, Gab, is that this year marks 50 years of diplomatic relations with Vietnam. So once foes, now friends, Australia and Vietnam.